All right, can you hear me?
Yes, sir. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir. How you doing?
I'm doing good. How's everything going on your end?
Man, I tell you what, everything is great, but I am getting over the flu right now. So, if you hear a little sniffles and a sneeze
Yeah,
or something,
they pushing it in the air, man. If
yeah,
you know
I know.
conspiracy theorists, they pushing it in the air.
Yeah.
It's one of three things. It's either you got the flu, you got COVID, or you have some kind of respiratory problem, and they just putting them all together. Like everybody, or you just get all three of them at the same time. So trust me, I had it. So my son had it.
Oh
So he
wow.
had strep, then he had bronchitis,
Oh
and then he gave it to me. And so, yeah, so it was about a month and a half of just
yeah, back and forth and
yeah.
dealing with it. Yeah,
So
yeah.
no,
My
I
wife,
get it.
she
I get
has
it.
she has it right now as well. So I guess I passed it on to her.
No, I
Man,
get it.
it's disappointing because we had concert tickets too for the night and tomorrow. Actually,
Okay. Okay.
we're gonna go see Gladys Knight tonight, and then I got a little gray here, and then go see.
Oh, I'll say only but goodie. You like
Yeah,
only but goodie.
and then hopefully we can go to the one tomorrow if she's feeling a little better. But we'll see.
Who's
So
tomorrow?
tomorrow is Escape in 702.
Okay. Yeah. So a little bit, 80, 90. So first you were like 70, 80. Now it's like 80, 90.
Yeah, I was born 1970, so
Okay. Okay.
so the 80s, 90s is when I was really getting into music.
Gotcha.
Yeah, but Gladys Knight, that was my mom's music. You feel me? And I remember hearing it in the house, so it's all good.
I gotcha. It makes sense, man. It makes sense.
Yeah. So you got any questions?
No questions on my end. At this time, I think
Okay.
I'm gonna look
You
at
locked in.
a few of the episodes, so I kind of know, just I mean, it's all similar. Just be open, honest, and transparent.
Right. That's it, man. And I tell you, well, I don't know. I can always just put this in the interview, but I was looking at your Instagram. I love your messaging, right? Because for me, one is trying to come up with a social media strategy, marketing strategy. I don't have an elaborate team that's doing it, and I think I came up with something kind of, got me a little thing to tell me what I'm going to do from day to day. But honestly, me getting in front of the camera was not what I like to do. And so when I came in to do the podcast, it was kind of a stretch for me. I like to be the guy behind the camera, taking the photos, taking the videos, directing, things like that. But I wasn't able to get the message that I was trying to get across. So you got to get in front of the camera. So here I am. But with that means like you get on there and you have all these different messages, day to day. And it's like, oh man, aspiring to be able to go in and do that. So I guess it's easy because you have a message, right? You have a clear message that you are telling to the listeners and to the people who get strength in things from you. So I'm gonna
challenge you. I'll challenge you on that because I
Yeah.
challenge all of my clients and I challenge everyone that I work with on both sides, on a spiritual side, because I don't know how much you went into my profile, but so on one side I am a pastor.
Yeah.
And so a part of that, and we could even start on this, so I don't want to go too much, but I have a heart now because on one side I pastor, but then I also feel like I've got a calling.
Yeah.
And so now, even if you look at churches, there are some pastors that their specialty might be, they might not like it, but it might be prosperity. Their gifting is to teach on prosperity.
Yeah.
You have other pastors that they're gifted in teaching and healing. I feel like he's called me to teach in leadership and leadership development,
Right.
and building and training leaders, right? So I kind of see myself as a pastor to businesses, business owners, and entrepreneurs. And so I want to pastor them so that they can maximize their messages so that they can be able to share it. because someone like yourself, even the name of your podcast itself, the hindsight is a message. And that's why I say I don't want to go too much into it. So I'll give you a little snippet, because even where I'm currently right now, I'm getting ready to write a book. And, you'll ask me this question, but I'm about to write a book. And it's probably one of the hardest books I have ever written, because it's an hindsight book. But it's also a book that I'm struggling through in an imposter syndrome, because I'm not where I think I should be. But the power of the book is at least I'm 5 steps ahead of my 5 years ago self. And so there's someone currently in my 5-year old self, the 5-year ago self, that is not in my current state. And if I can help the 5-year ago version of myself not make the same mistakes, I have a message right there. And so it's not about, and I'll even tell you, and we can go back into it later. So the name of the book is, so I went through a divorce. I went through a divorce in ministry, and it's a lot of things I learned in ministry. I'm getting ready to write a book called But God, The Road to Restoration. I haven't got restoration yet. Me and my ex-wife aren't back together. But I'm going to write a book about it, and I'm going to explain all the mistakes I made along the way. And someone will be like, well, why would you write a book if you aren't restored? And it's like, because I want to tell the 5-year ago version of myself all the dumb mistakes I made that hindered restoration sooner. The children of Israel did not have to be in the wilderness for 40 years. And so if Joshua could have wrote a book about, listen, if you don't want to stay in the wilderness for 40 years, maybe you should do this. Maybe you should do that. And some of us aren't sharing that message, because there's someone that you could save 40 years of trauma if they would simply share with them the lessons you learned in the wilderness.
Yeah. Wow. Yep. This is going to be powerful. Let's get it. Let's get it. Let's get it.
When you look back in hindsight, everything is 20/20. In hindsight, we make mistakes, we're learning from it. In hindsight, yesterday and your tomorrow. In hindsight, is so much clearer now.
What if the challenges that you face are not roadblocks, but stepping stones? Today's guest on Hindsight the Podcast knows firsthand the power of trusting the process, even when life seems to fall apart. Stephen Foster, a minister, entrepreneur, and author, has transformed personal failures into powerful lessons, helping others turn their mess into their message. Let's get into it, Stevens. Let's get into Stephen's journey of resilience, faith, and using setbacks as the foundation for success. Now, let's get into it. Hey, how you doing this morning, Stephen?
I'm doing good. Welcome. So I'm definitely excited, just to be on this podcast. I love the concept, the name of hindsight, because we always say hindsight is 20/20. And you always hear someone say, man, I wish I knew today what I knew. I wish I knew 5 years ago what I knew today.
Yeah.
But even in hindsight, the best part about hindsight is today. So in hindsight is great. But now that you know, what will you do today better that you know? And I think that's sometimes even where we struggle. It's like, man, hindsight was 20/20. But what the better version of you looks like today. So what will you do today to make a better tomorrow?
Yeah, and that's the concept. The concept of this podcast is really to look at yesterday and figure out what you did right, what you did wrong, right? And build off of those experiences that you've already had. Don't keep doing the wrong stuff, because we want to create a better us. We want to create a better future us, a better present us, right? And it's all based off of decisions. And the decisions, the best way to gauge those decisions are the ones that we've already made. And we know the results. We know the answers, whether we let you know about what those answers are. We know within ourselves that we screwed up on this one, right? Or we hit a home run with this decision, right? So that's the whole concept. And I'm very excited to have you on the show as well. So thank you for joining me. I know it's early in the morning. And I was actually, where are you calling from?
No. It's mid for me. So I'm in Baltimore. I'm in Baltimore. I mean, make sure I say it right. Native to my hometown. I'm from Baltimore. It's a funny inside joke. If you say Baltimore, you probably don't live or from Baltimore. It's a whole inside thing. But if you say Baltimore, then people know that you actually live there.
All right. So what's funny, and I knew this about you, if you see the little logo on here and it says to be more, that's my goal, to be more. But I want to tell you something. I'm from Baltimore too.
Okay.
And I'm going to say Baltimore. I'm from Baltimore. I'm from all of that, right? Me and my wife, we were just talking about this. She was like, you don't talk like, most people say you're from the country. So I did like 20-something years in the military. And once I left, I think I left Baltimore when I was 14 years old. And I moved to PG County, Maryland. So Oxon Hill. I don't know if you're familiar with that.
Yep. It's right up the street. But
yeah.
It's a whole thing with that. Like you ever notice? I say this is my squirrel. Because you know that even in the DMV, they don't consider Baltimore in the DMV. Is weird, but that's a whole nother story.
Oh wow, I didn't know that. I've been away too long.
It's its own entity. It's its own entity. Like PG, all that other stuff is in the DMV, and then when we get to Baltimore, it's just like, nah, they're not in the DMV. Yeah, but it's the whole thing.
Hey, do you mind sharing just a little bit about who you are and how, well, not necessarily how you got to be who you are, but just tell us a little bit about who you are.
Yeah. So first off, a little bit in your interview, you stated just a little bit. And so for me, my journey, it's been a journey of discovery. And even as you say, who you are, it's always evolving with better understanding of myself. And so for many, many years, I thought that I was just a simple pastor that preached the word and do these different kind of things. And I may have been like father, husband, all these kind of things. And so now as I'm evolving, I am understanding who I am so much better in life. So now if someone asks me like, Stephen, like, who are you? I see myself as simply a pastor to leaders, entrepreneurs, and CEOs. And even in the kind of like the spiritual realm, you might have people that says, even in the business world, you have business experts that specialize in maybe productivity. You have other people in the business aspect that they specialize in marketing. And then even in the spiritual world, you may have pastors that specialize in prosperity. It's not a knock, not a shot, but that's just how they're wired. For me, I understand that I am wired to help in a spiritual aspect, to help leaders, entrepreneurs do this business thing, this God thing, this building the kingdom here on earth in a biblical, fundamental process that honors God. I love the passage where it says, seek ye first the kingdom of God, and everything else will be added unto you. And so I see myself as a pastor to leaders, entrepreneurs, CEOs, so that I can help them go out and make the impact that only they can make in a kingdom way.
You mentioned some words. Who are you? Who am I? And I switched it around because I want whoever's listening, whoever's watching to think about that. Who am I? And really think about it. You mentioned before we started talking, which I'm still going to air in this episode, that you were writing a book. And we'll talk about the book in detail a little bit. I'm writing one as well. Because one of the biggest things that I found was a challenge for me was understanding who I was, and you can say, hey, well, I work for this place, or I'm such and such dad, or, but it doesn't really get to the core of who you are. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is for the squirrel purpose of it all. You said, who are you? Who am I? And I just want people to really sit back. And as you're listening to this conversation, think about who you are as well. I mean, hear what we're saying, of course, but think about who you are, because who you are is going to make your future self to be who you are and who you want to be. Because typically when you think of who you are, and I don't want to say too many words, I may edit some of this out, but I probably won't. When you think about who you are, you're usually describing who other people think you are and not who you really are, right? You're following someone else's plan. And we need to stop that and get on our own plan. So enough of that. Squirrel. All right. Back to you.
No. So I think it's a good point. Because here's the point in that. Because every person, there are multiple plans going on at the same time. And that actually was one of my first book, Understanding That You're Right on Schedule. But in understanding like who are you, there are multiple plans going on at the same time. There's your plan. There is culture's plan for you. This is what your environment tells you should do. Then you have who your family believes you should be. Then you have who the adversary is trying to get you to become. Then there's ultimately the divine plan, the ultimate plan, the plan that you were created for. And the better way that I would like to say is the problem that you were created to solve. That's the essence of who you are. Because every person was created to solve a problem, but you cannot solve that problem until you unlock who you are. And when you unlock who you are, then you unlock the answer to the problem that only you can solve. But if you're trying the plan of your parents, that's not answering the problem that you were created to solve. If you are molding to culture, then you might end up being, because like when I was younger, I thought I was going to be an architect. And so that's not the problem. The problem that I was created to solve wasn't to build skyscrapers. And I could have went down that road, but I would have never answered the question or the problem that only I can. And then the adversary, he wants you to just basically lie dormant and answer no problem and be stagnant. And so that's another plan that is going on with a lot of us that, like, what's my purpose? Who am I? Like, what should I be doing? Because here's the trick of the enemy. He would love for you to simply be like, who am I? And in my book, You're Right on Schedule, I kind of talk about this. When all of those things were taken away from me, it really helps you get to who are you. So it's not just who are you, like, are you a father? Because if I take that away, who are you? Like, oh, I'm a business owner. But if I take that away from you, who are you? And so when I begin to see, like, who am I? Like, I am a person that God has created to solve this problem. Then I really begin to understand who am I. And when you understand who you are, then you also understand what you're not. Like, I'm not, and this is not a knock. So I might say a name, but this is not a knock. I'm not TD Jakes, but I'm also not Greg Cozone, And so when you understand who you're not, you can also understand who you are.
So this is why I came in prepared. I got my little notebook, paper, and my pen. Right. I knew I was going to get this, right? That's why I told you I was really excited to have you on the show today to just, share different perspectives. You feel me? Like that whole to solve a problem, that I never even looked at it like that. So now I got to go back in the lab in the in the basement and figure out who I am. You feel me? So thank you so much for adding some more pressure on my life. No, that's a joke. Not at all. That's a joke. That's a joke.
It's easier. It's easier. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, it becomes easier when you and this was a journey for me. And that's all a part of life. It's the journey. In hindsight, I wish I understood the answer that only I could solve, because it would have saved me $100,000 mistakes. If I understood the problem that only I could solve, it would have solved me going through a divorce. Like, it would have, if I understood the problem that only I could solve, it would have it would have helped me not go through church split and all of the failures in business. But when I understood the problem only I could solve, it became so much easier. Because I don't know if this is one of your questions, but I'll just throw this in there, because what ends up happening is that I begin to run with grace and I stopped grinding. Like, when I didn't know who I was, I was grinding. I was grinding to make more money. I was grinding to grow the church. I was grinding to get more speaking engagements. I was grinding to prove who I was. But what I understood when I understood the problem that only I could solve is there's only enough grace for the problem that I can solve. There is not grace to solve the problem that I see someone else solving. It's not grace for trying to be someone that I'm not. And when I did that, it was so much heartache trying to grind. And I know culture tells grind, like, man, I'll sleep when I'm dead. It's no sleep for the weary. And if I could just add this little, I think that is such an attack of a satanic force to get people so caught up in fast, go. And they're actually missing the simple answer. because the simple answer, it's simple because that's where the grace of a good pace is.
Preach.
No, preach. Just real talk. Just real talk.
Now that is, and preaching is real talk. It's simplified.
Yeah.
You simplifying things. We complicate a lot of things. And I really appreciate all of that. So you mentioned a little bit, so we just jump into this really quick. I don't know if this is the year to pivot, to find out that things happen, but 2018, what happened?
Yeah, so man, 2018 was definitely a interesting year for me because hindsight, and I kind of wrote this down even to kind of work through this. Like in 2018, I thought the world was flat. And here's what I mean by that. I thought that everything was good. It was great. Like I was progressing in life, and at that time I was building a church, and I thought, like, man, now I'm traveling, I'm speaking, and everything on the surface looked good. With people were looking at it, it's like, man, you are killing it right now.
Yeah.
And in that season of my life, like, I felt like I had the golden ticket to do whatever I wanted to do. Like if I wanted to do this, it just seemed like it was just working. Like, man, you know what? Like, I think I want to start this. And somehow the money would just show up. And so I thought that, like, man, life couldn't get any better than it is right now.
Right.
However, during that time, the first part of that was, I was in a transition in the church where I will make this very clear, I wanted to grow the church bigger. I wanted it to feel like it could reach more people. And during that time, I made a decision to partner with another church that was saying, hey, we can help take some of the stress off. All you got to do is just kind of come under, take our name, and we will resource you to continue to do what you're currently doing, because we see that you're doing it, but we think that it could blow up if you had the right resources. And I was like, yeah, man, let's do this. It was always something that was just like, I don't know. But I was like, no, this is going to be my big break.
Yeah.
So I started that. And then 3 months into it, it just didn't make sense. It stopped making sense. Now, hindsight, once again, I'll always use your keyword to say hindsight. A lot of this, even going into that situation, I went into a very prideful. I want to be that very clear. Like I went into that situation very prideful, like they needed me. And like I was doing them a favor in this partnership. And it went south really, really quick. Upon it going south in about 3 months. So at one point I'm growing this church. I'm thriving. I had a church. And 3 months later, I go from
3 months
pastoring a church to simply sitting home saying I wanted to be completely done with ministry, with church, with God altogether. And I said, you know what? I have been doing such a great job with building, developing, doing leadership structure. You know what? I'll take this gift and I'll take it out to the business world. And so then what I started doing was the same concepts that I was kind of sort of teaching. Now I'm taking these to Fortune 500 companies. I'm taking it to Blue Cross Blue Shield. I'm taking it to other companies, and I'm teaching these concepts, and they are paying well. When I tell you, companies pay well for leadership development.
Right.
But even in that, I was just grinding. And then I was like, you know what? I'm going to take all these concepts and I'm going to put them in a book. And I'm going to call the book, What's Your Next Step? And I'm going to give all these leadership concepts. And then somebody was like, man, we love the book. We would love to sponsor the book, and we'll give you, XYZ to produce the book. And so I'm like, once again, I'm feeling like life is great. And then all of a sudden, I get a text message and said, I didn't sign up for this. If I'm going to be alone, if I'm going to have to raise a kid all by myself, then I probably should do it all by myself. And so that was the text message that at that time I had got from my ex-wife, and it was done. She said, I don't want anything else to do with this, because on one side, I feel like I'm just a trophy for you to show that you are a good husband and a good man, but ultimately home, you are never here. And so went through that. So then it was the church that completely shut down, and I'm a PK. So
Okay, hold on. All right, so I need to slow you down just a second, because you're giving me. So what in that 3 months? What made you go from let's go to I'm done with it with the church?
So the church.
What happened?
Yeah. So the first part with the church part was, it was, now that it was so much tension, it was, I'm not going to go back and redo all of this again, because it's hard work. So basically what I would have had to do was, and just to kind of put context to that. So I had to do a lot of, and I just throw a number out there, to start what I was doing before. It took about $250,000 to start the church.
Mm-hmm.
And I was able to raise that. I mean, equipment, all of these things, a facility. And when I did the transition, I basically sold everything and part connected with this church. And so to start over, I was going to have to do all of that again, get the 250, talk to people, raise a community, get a team. And I was just like, I'm not doing that again. Because I did.
I thought the purpose of the other one was to relieve some of that stress. I thought maybe financial, some of the other day-to-day type stuff, and it looks like it didn't. Was it a false promise? I mean, what happened there?
So here's the part where I want to own my part. So
okay, yeah.
At the time, that is what I would say.
Okay,
I would say it was a false promise.
Yeah.
However, I want to own my part of it, where I went in it very prideful. And,
you said that, yeah.
And so me and the leader just kept bumping heads.
Got it.
And so on some sides, yes, it could have been some communication issues or some false promises. But on the other side, I went in it so bull-headed that I wasn't even willing to kind of compromise or let things go. And so we just kept bumping heads. And so we bumped heads so much that I was like, I'm out. Like, I'm not going to keep, I don't have to deal with this per se. I don't have to deal with this. Like, I'm good all by myself. So I know maybe I won't do it in this lane, but I can do this all again.
Okay.
And so it was my pride that basically sent me out and said, you know what? I can do the same thing in the business world, and without all the stress, without all the hassle. And I know that I can make 6 figures doing this with less stress.
Yeah.
And so that's where it kind of went with the church scenario. And so I basically walked away, and that's why I said that was hard for me, because I'm a PK. So I've been in church my whole life.
Yeah.
And almost for the 3 months after that, for almost a whole year, I didn't go to church at all. I was just traveling, my relationship. Like, nope, I don't have anything to do. Only thing I want to focus on is grinding, making money, making money. Because at that point I said, I'm betting on myself. If no one else is betting on me, I'm betting on myself. I don't need another person in this world as long as I got me. And so that mindset created friction in so many different areas of my life, even with my ex-spouse, because now I'm like, well, you don't understand me, and nobody understands me, and nobody's here for me. So you know what? I'm going to bet on myself. And if nobody will bet on me, I won't sleep until I prove every last one of you guys wrong.
Wow.
And so, yeah.
Go ahead.
No, you good. Yep.
Because I did have questions, but I like the conversation. You feel me?
Yeah.
So what I'm thinking is, like, now, here you are now.
And
2018, you had some things, you had pride. You've recognized that. You went in, you looked in the mirror and said, okay, I own that one. Your wife, she couldn't handle it at the time. But when you look at it right now, probably say subtract the wife. Was it worth it for the financial gain that you got? Was it worth it for understanding? Maybe you had to go through that heartache. You had to go through that pain in order to find your purpose, in order to find your calling, is what you called it. Do you look at it that way?
So this is I would say first, if I would answer your first question, I would say no.
Okay.
But at the same time,
it was a journey.
I don't know if I would have got the same clarity without it. Now I wish in hindsight that it could have been different, but knowing me, I'm not sure without being punched in my mouth.
Yeah, that's it.
If I would have actually been like, because there's a story of a man named Jonah. And I think that sometimes we miss this. And if I'm honest, I always heard this. I just didn't listen to this. And I think even in hindsight, if we're honest, we always knew, we just did not obey.
Mm-hmm.
And so the story of Jonah is basically, he was told to go a place.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in life, we are simply just told sometimes the right direction to go in. But pride, arrogance, disobedience, all of those things that were going on in my heart
Mm-hmm.
caused me not to listen. And as a byproduct of that, created the storms.
Yeah, got it.
And the storms is what taught me the lessons. However, it didn't have to be that way.
Mm-hmm.
Because initially, all you had to do was just listen to go with this direction.
Yeah.
But because you didn't go this direction, then there was a lesson that needed to be taught. Versus, because I'll say it a simpler way. This is the simplest way I can say it. My dad used to tell me this. Experience is a good teacher, but it's not the best teacher.
Yeah.
Other people's experience is the best teacher because it simply states, don't go that way. And if you follow it, you have learned an excellent lesson. But if you don't, then you have to get the second lesson, which is called experience. And so the choice is yours.
Yeah, I hear you. And it really, if you look at just the statement in itself, and you look at scenarios, and you look at the variables, the people who are giving you their experiences, and giving you their lessons, sometimes it's fine to go and not listen to other people's experiences because it could hold you back from your purpose. So it's a challenge. And then the other thing I just wanted to say is we learn from our traumas, from our mistakes, from the heartaches, and we don't have to go through every heartache and everything over and over again. And I always say this is why we got books. That's why we got people talking. We got TV. We got all these different things, right, that kind of tells you the story, like where you need to go, to your point earlier. But sometimes I believe it could be in the better interest of a person to go off the beaten path every now and again, because that's where the gains are made. That's where the trailblazers or the pivots or the revolutions or these different things happen. So what do you think about that? And I know we're getting real general.
I 100% agree. So I think even in that there are two buckets, right? I think there are two buckets.
Yeah.
I think there's buckets that I have to, and then there's other buckets that I don't have to. And so there was another writer who said this. He said that there are some whoopings I got because of the gospel. And then he said there are other whoopings I got because of my pride. And so I think there are two buckets of life experiences. I think there are some experiences that we don't have to learn the hard way. But then I think if I connect this all back to the message, but there are other experiences that I have to go through because it gives me the answer to the problem that only I can solve. Now, if this is not the answer to a problem that you can solve, then this is an experience that you did not have to go through. And if I was even to dive in this just a little bit deeper, like I would dive into it deeper even in scenarios like this. Like even when it comes to, I would say, we can go down this road. Like maybe, hey, for one person, going through certain sexual experiences was a part of their journey because it was an answer that they had to solve. But that same person didn't have to go through financial troubles because that's not the answer that they had to solve. Does that make sense? So on one side, this one, because it's the answer. But on this one, they didn't have to experience that. They just needed to listen and follow previous instructions.
Right. No, I love it. I love it. I love you being vulnerable, and I'm just throwing stuff out there.
Listen,
you know what I'm saying?
I love being hot. I think if you aren't hot, then you're probably not healed.
Yeah. Wow. So how did you get through it? Like, what made you pivot? What made you check your pride, your ego? What made you hear your calling? Can you pinpoint that pivot in mentality? Yeah.
So after, we talked a little bit about 2018. So 2018 happened.
Yeah.
And during that time, so now, no ministry, lost a wife.
And a book deal, right? Yeah.
And a book deal. And the book deal. And then at that time, like, all of those things culminated. Then it created another thing where it was now financial loss, because now I'm completely trying to figure out, like, well, what's next for me?
Yeah.
And it was going into 2019. It was so clear that this message that came, and I thought it was hilarious when I heard it. So all of these things happened, and then I'm journaling one day, and I'm just kind of just reflecting, and then I heard something say, "You're right on schedule." What?
I know that's right. Yeah.
And I said, and so I was like, yeah, so that's a joke. And it says, no, write that down. You're right on schedule. And I was like, how am I on schedule? Like, in my mind, I thought by, 35, I would have this thriving church that is now planning other locations. I thought that I would be traveling the world speaking. I thought that by now that, I would have 2 kids, and me and my wife, we would travel. Like, how am I right on schedule when none of this has happened? And then this is when there are 4 mantras that I put in the book, You're Right on Schedule. And the first mantra in this season that kind of helped me transition through, it was that nothing can change your position. And I was like, what? Like, I don't understand that. And it was like,
okay,
you have to understand that when you're going through what you're going through, it doesn't change, when we go back to the beginning of this conversation, who you are. You're going through it, but it doesn't change who you are. You're becoming who you were always called to be. And that doesn't change your position. Another way that the analogy I use is that if you go to the MVA, you go to the MVA, and as soon as you walk through the door, you're going to get your tags renewed, and you go in the door and they give you a ticket. Yeah. And you sit down and you look, and they might be on A7, but the ticket that you have might say I-24. And you are like, what in the world? Like, and then you have to go to the MVA and you look, and it's only like, it may be only 30 people in there, or it may be 50 people in there, but you're like, this number and this ticket don't match what I see.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, it's like, this ticket says I am like 400 people away, because if I go A1 to 32 and AB, like, the ticket doesn't match. But the one thing that remains is that your position on that ticket doesn't change no matter who came before or who came after. You are now in a position to get exactly what you came for. And so this is the concept that I had to understand, is that, hey, you were called for a purpose, on a purpose, with a purpose. And so setbacks, divorce, church closures, book deals, none of that is changing the position of who you were designed, the answer that you were called to solve. Listen, just because it hasn't happened yet doesn't mean that it's not going to happen. The position that you have, it has a divine time. It just needs to go through the process. And so it needs to go through A, it needs to go through B, it needs to go through C, it needs to go through D, it needs to go through E. And the position that you have, your number will be called at the right time, because you are right on schedule. And just because the plan doesn't look like how you planned it doesn't mean the schedule isn't still according to what was always set before you. And so that was the first one. It was just understanding, like, nothing can change your position.
Yeah,
and then the second thing that kind of helped me through, and you can stop me and ask the question on that if you like.
No, go ahead.
And then the second mantra that I talk about in the book is not only that nothing could change your position, but you have to understand that he was always playing the long game. And so my dad used to say this. He would say something like, if you gave a fool $1 million, you know what he is? He's a fool
with $1 million.
$1 million.
Yeah.
And so all he's going to do is amplify what he was all his foolish behaviors before the $1 million.
Yeah.
And so God understands, even in his infinite wisdom, that he has to play the long game with us, because there's a writer who says this. He says that your gift will present you before kings, but what he doesn't say is that your character will keep you in the room with kings. And so in playing the long game, it is to make sure that your character, not your skills don't get you in front of the right people, but your character can keep you in front of the right people. Because we hear stories all the time of business owners and leaders and CEOs and all of these people falling because they're sleeping with their secretary, they're stealing money, they're embezzling this, they're doing that. And so their gifts and abilities and talents are getting them to skyrocket, but they have no character to actually keep them there. And I believe that we're in a season of full transparency and vulnerability where skills is not good enough. We need men and women and people of character to really lead and move the ball forward for helping people really get to the next step. And so that was the second thing, that nothing, well, first, nothing can change your position. Two, that he's in the mix. And the third part, the third part was he's in the mix, right? And so what I mean by that is, and I'll share again. So the first one was nothing could change your position. He was always playing the long game. And the third part was he's in the mix. And the way that he began to show it to me in that was like, I'm a neat eater. And I don't know if your listeners or you understand, you know what a neat eater is?
I was about to ask you, what's a neat eater?
Yeah, okay, no problem. I used to, so basically, Thanksgiving, you know how Thanksgiving, you just throw all the food on your plate? That's not me. I need the sections. I need the
the section plate
here.
Yeah.
I need macaroni and cheese right here. I need chicken right here. And then I need to get another plate to put the ham on, the rolls on. I have multiple plates because if things touch, I don't want to eat it.
I used to be that way when I was younger. And then I'm gonna tell you, I used to be that way when I was younger, for real. And maybe it's a Baltimore thing, right? But then I went in the military. Okay, and things changed. But go ahead.
Yeah. No. And so what he began to show me was like, because for me, if things to touch, I'm throwing it away. Because to me, that's nasty. Like, I don't like that. Like, why do I want greens juice on my chicken? That's disgusting.
I don't like that. But go ahead.
So I'm throwing it away. I'm not eating that. Like, who's going to eat that? But what he showed me is something, when we look at something that says this, all things work together for the good. And so when we look at that in life and being right on schedule to help me walk through, is that pain and purpose have to touch each other and it will become good. Failures and faith have to touch each other and they will become good. Joy and jealousy sometimes touch each other and he can make it turn good. And so being right on schedule, you have to know that he's all in the mix.
I like that.
He's not just in the mix in the joy and the happiness and the faithfulness. He's also in the mix of the pain, of the disappointments, of the divorce. He's in the mix of all of that. And he can cause it all to work for good because you're right on schedule. And so him being in the mix is just mixing it all up like a good bowl of jambalaya, making it good. And so the final thing that really helped transform everything to be right on schedule is the final part was how you can take what's messy and turn it into a message. And so when you understand nothing can change your position, when you can understand that he's in the mix, when you can understand that he's playing the long game, You can look at all of that, and most people would see it as messy, but you can take it and be like, that's a message. And that's what motivated me to keep pushing through. Because most people would look at what I went through as messy. But I seen the good in it and turned it into a message.
Love it. Love it. All right. So now we're going to take all this experience that you've gained, and I'm going to ask you a specific question. For entrepreneurs that are facing setbacks, what's the first step in turning their mess into their message from your perspective?
Yeah, I think the first part of turning their mess into a message, and, this is the first thing that I take my clients through, is that I want them to, that the way they can see their thing is I do this thing called a kingdom impact statement. Because if you want to take your mess and turn it into a message, you have to understand what your kingdom impact statement, and let me explain what your kingdom impact statement is that now that you've gone through, what have you learned from it? And then what you've learned from it, looking back, what is that one thing that you would tell your previous self? And the way that I like to say is that, like, you went through it, but what is the one or two things that you would tell yourself at the beginning of the journey when you were walking through this? And when you can do that, that is how you can start seeing what seemed messy and begin turning it into a message. Because that's what I had to do in the Right On schedule. Like, I had to look back and say, man, nothing could change my position. Man, he was in the mix. He was playing the long game. And then from that is where the message came. But it is not until you can look back in hindsight and grab those things and speak. Because the biggest thing is you have to, like, a lot of people want to write books and they want to help people. I think the simplest way to do it is stop trying to help people. Help and I'm sorry I keep saying it, but I just want to make sure that it's clear. Stop trying to help people. Just help the self that you were when you started your journey. And if you help the self that you were, then you can ultimately help other people, because there are other people right where you were. And I think sometimes we're trying to help other people before we actually speak to the old version of you.
Yeah. I agree. Powerful insight. All right. This is amazing. We might have to do a part 2 to this, if you're willing.
I move. That's what I say. Like, I don't want to rush anything. Like, I want to give you guys everything that I got. If I got it, I want to give it. So I'm open.
All right, cool. So for my fellow veterans out there, I know the difficulty in transitioning into new roles. So, like, what advice would you give to anybody, those stepping into uncertainty in their careers or an entrepreneurial venture, or, just the uncertainty? What advice would you give?
Yeah. So here's, it's hard to say this, and, and some, it's a hard truth. Here's a hard truth. For anyone venturing out and transitioning, I would say fail fast, fail often, because this is how you can you'll never know what you're great at until you know what you're not good at. And when you know what you're not good at, then you can mark that off the list. But so many people are trying to play it safe in so many things where it's like, oh, I don't want to try this, or I don't want to try that. I would challenge you to look at any successful person. There is not a successful person, I don't care who you name, that hasn't failed at least 10 to 15 times. Like, it's just like billionaires.
Yeah.
Some of the most wealthiest people at one point or two in their life were also some of the most broke people in their life, because they had to take risks, and they had to take risks. And I think sometimes in transition, we're trying to be safe, and actually being safe. You ever seen someone trying to jump off a cliff, but they're scared, and then they actually hurt themselves because they're trying to, like, protect themselves or they're kind of scared. And I think in transitions, this is why so many people hurt themselves or wound themselves and they can never get back up, is because they're trying to play it safe, but also take a risk.
Yeah.
And it's either or. It's either you're going to play it safe or you're going to take a risk.
Yeah.
But when you try to do both, you actually injure yourself.
That's actually a great analogy to jumping off the cliff. I guess you just see so many videos on social media where you get ready and then you hesitate just a little bit and it's just tumbling. So that is a great analogy, something that you can put in your head when you come to that. I got to make a decision, right? Am I going to go all in? Am I going to take this risk, or am I going to keep it safe? And you better choose one or the other, because if you're unsure when you go to that moment, it's going to be a lot of fumbling and bumbling there. So I agree. All right, how many books did you write, by the way? You just popping them off.
Yeah. So two books so far. So one book is called You're Right on Schedule. And then my second book was called God's Game Plan: How to Go from Blank Pages to Bestseller in 50 days. And so that was my second book. And so now I'm in the process of writing a third book. I'm in the process of writing a third book, and it's by far I feel like my hardest journey. I thought my first book was hard because I had to be transparent in that book. But this third book is super hard for me, because everything that I talk about in God's Game Plan: How to Go from bestseller blank pages to bestseller in 50 days, I have to even walk through it myself, because one of the first things I tell people, even when they're writing a book, is that you have to overcome imposter syndrome. Because a lot of times most people either won't write books for a few reasons. First reason people don't write books because they feel like they don't have a message to share. And number two, people don't write books because they feel like everyone has already written about this topic. And so why should I write more about a topic that everyone is writing about? And then the third reason is people don't feel that they, even while they may have a message, they know what to write about, but they still don't feel qualified to speak on this topic. And so I'm at the third place in this journey of the book. And I'll kind of throw the book out there. So I kind of talked about going through, the transition and some of the things that happened with me and my ex-wife. And so now I'm in a journey of writing a book. And this is why it's hard for me, because for me, I've always felt this book and seen this book when I started writing books. But I thought that I would write it at a different place in my life. And so the name of the book is simply called But God. And I think that all of us have some but God moments. And in this but God moment, it's basically talking about how certain things that we see in our lives, it only could have happened through a but God moment. And the thing that I'm talking about in this book is restoration. I am a firm believer in restoration. I am a firm believer in reconciliation. And so now I'm writing a book about reconciliation and restoration, because even in that, I think that it has to be a but God moment for it actually to work. And so I'm writing a book about it, but I'm writing a book not at the end point of restoration, not at the end point of reconciliation, but I am writing it from a place that says, hey, once again, I am not where I like to be, but I want to speak to the person that I was 5 years ago, because I made so many mistakes in the journey that has kept me still on the journey of restoration. And if I can help someone not make the same mistakes of, pushing too hard, saying too much, arguing about the simple things, making sure that, unity, there are so many things that I was like, man, I wish I would have done these things so that restoration could have happened. And so that's what I said. So that's my third book that I'm writing a book about. It's called But God: The Journey Towards What Was Broken
Yeah.
and marriage restoration.
Okay. I like it. I'm looking forward to reading But God. So be sure to let me know, and I'll be sure to let the listeners know when that book comes out. And that's real talk. Because there's a lot of lessons, man. I made a lot of mistakes. And, just going back and looking at it, owning it, is a journey in itself. Stop blaming other people for things. You mentioned that earlier. I'm a own my part of this process, right? My pride. That's a hard thing to do because we tell ourselves these lies constantly, right? To keep our ego built up. So anyway, that's enough there. But Stephen, how can the listeners connect with you and learn more about your work?
Yeah. So the first thing is that I would love just to give all the listeners, it doesn't matter where you are on your journey, but I would love to every listener that is listening, give them a copy of my first book, You're Right on Schedule. And so listen, if you want a copy of You're Right on Schedule, if you were to text the number 949-383-5402, the word next, and I'll say it again, the number is 949-383-4502. Text the word next. I'll send you a copy of the book, You're Right on Schedule. And then the second thing is that I talked a little bit about it, and maybe we'll talk about this more on the second thing. But one thing that I even do now in the journey that I'm on is that I literally help coaches, authors, consultants, pastors, leaders take their mess and turn it into a message. And so wherever you are in the journey of writing a book, and we didn't even touch on all of the things that go into book development, because one thing that I've learned in my journey is that your book is a bridge. Your book is a bridge. And when you first write your book, or even while the message is brewing down on the inside of you, your book, your mess, it's simply 2 fish and 5 loaves. And if you keep your message down on the inside of you, it's just 2 fish and 5 loaves. And if you eat it, it's just enough for you. But when you can write a book and then break it and allow it to be blessed, it can feed the multitudes, and it will bless a multitude of people. And so what I help people do is not just write a book, but I help them break it and multiply it and turn it into a multitude of incomes, where your book can now become podcasts, and your book can become paid speaking engagements, where your book can now become high-end coach clients, where your book can now allow you to travel the world and see things, because we've broken the book. It's content. And I know we didn't talk about this much, but in your book that you're writing, you can take your book. If someone right now says, Stephen, and you said, man, how do you create your messages? You know how I create my messages? It is simply from my book. So if someone right now says, Stephen, I need to write a week worth of content, I would simply pick up my book, and I can open it up to any page. Blah, blah, blah. I'm going to stop right there. Okay. I thought they would support me, right? So that's a chapter in my book. And so now I'm going to create content for the next 5 days about that chapter in my book, and talk about how I thought that my family would support me one day. I'm going to talk about how I thought the community would support me one day. I'm going to talk about how I thought my wife would support me in one day. And then I'm going to give lessons based off of that content. But it simply all came from a book. And I can do that with anything. If someone wanted me to speak to men right now, I would open my book and says, man, I want to talk about how men need to eat pie every day. And I'm going to talk to men about how they need to be physically better, intellectually better, emotionally better, and spiritually better. And where did that come from? Directly from the book. And so this is what I help clients do. I help them not only write a book, but help them figure out how to take that message, break it, and create multiple streams of income out of that book. And so listen, if you're interested in that, you can go to the website, it's yournextstep.org, and there fill out just a quick questionnaire, and we'll schedule a discovery call, and I'll walk with you and figure out a plan and help you make your next step your best step. And thirdly, if you want to connect with me on any of the social media, I'm on Instagram and Facebook. You can connect with me at Stephen Foster, YNS. And so listen, this was an amazing session. And so whichever way you connect with me, I would love to help you make your next step your best step, because I believe in you, and I believe that you have the answer to a problem that the world has been waiting for. The question is, are you ready to take that messy situation and turn it into a message to answer the question that the world has been asking for?
Stephen, thank you so much for sharing your journey of faith, resilience, and transformation. Your story of turning setbacks into stepping stones is truly inspiring. And I know the listeners gain valuable insights into trusting the process. And if you enjoyed today's episode, make sure to subscribe to Hindsight the Podcast so you don't miss any of my powerful conversations. Remember, every challenge is a setup for you for your breakthrough. And tune in next week for more inspiring stories and actionable strategies. And I want you to stay on the lookout for session 2. So we're going to talk about books and writing books in 50 days. And I can see what I can pull out of Stephen in that episode. But thank you so much. Hey, thanks for joining me here on Hindsight the Podcast. I'm your host, Lee Jones. I hope you enjoyed this episode. I know I did. And while I have you here, why don't you take your mouse, go over and click on that subscribe button. No, not right there. Over to the right. No, down, right there. Boom. Thank you. Now, thank you for subscribing to Hindsight the Podcast. I'm your host, Lee Jones.